first, I would like to welcome John McDonnell to open our meeting. So thank you, John.
Okay, just a few minutes to just do a quick survey on where we're at the moment across the movement. Historically, what always happens if we have a electoral setback, as we did in December 19, where we were hoping for a Labour government that might be able to intervene on a whole range of issues to protect workers, their living standards, quality of life, and their employment rights and democratic rights. When that route fails and we're held back in terms of seeking to form a Labour government to assist on those matters, it's inevitable that we then have to also ensure that we are reinforcing the work that we're doing in terms of the industrial struggles and through our trade unions. Obviously, the ideal situation is to have a strong active trade union movement and the Labour government held to account by that movement. That's not the case at the moment with a Tory majority of 80. That's the first point to make. It is always the case that in these situations, we have to rely upon our trade union industrial strength, linked up with other social movements, of course, to ensure that we can promote the interests of our members and to promote the interests of our class overall. That's the first point. Second point is what's been interesting in this recent period is that unreported in most of the mainstream media, although I see UCU has got some good coverage today in the Guardian of all places, but usually unreported in the mainstream media, the scale of industrial activity taking place at the moment, campaigns by individual unions, is, I think, really significant. In 1 week, just in 1 day last week, I was on the demonstration and picket lines with IWGB in terms of the Uber driver strike. There's then meeting with the Unite members who Peter Express, who are campaigning again about their tips and not receiving the just rewards or a really decent income. And then onto that was the UCU picket lines, which I went to the Islington picket line in Gray's Inn Road, and there was a large number of colleges coming together. And the atmosphere actually was incredibly positive. And I think the reason people are coming out now in terms of taking industrial action and are willing to take action, whether it's campaigning, demonstrations, or industrial action, or other direct action forms, is because I think people really have had enough, and they are up against it. They're faced with the continuation of wages either frozen or cut. They're faced with what's increasing inflation, energy price rises coming, and then, of course, the universal credit cut. So I think people are realizing the seriousness of their own situation and therefore are willing to fight back. And that's where we come in. The government will be presenting its budget in a fortnight's time and its spending review, which will set the expenditure on public services for the next 3 years at least. I think what will happen is you'll hear lots about how we have to balance the books, how, as Sunak said in his speech at the Tory Party conference, that borrowing is immoral. And they will boast about some tax increases that they're making, but those tax increases are largely falling on working class people. But there will be inevitably another round of austerity. And that means it will be continuing wage freezes or wage cuts in the light of inflation reaching possibly 4%. But it'll also mean, I think, in certain key areas, despite all their rhetoric, there'll be being ongoing austerity. Now, the government rhetoric at the moment around education, FE and skills training and higher education is all about the need to invest to get a high-skilled, high-wages economy. That is belied by the fact that austerity continues on, and nothing that they're saying at the moment by way of any increased investment in any of those sectors in any way matches the scale of cuts that we've experienced over the last 7 years. They've denuded the sector, and they've also only been able to survive in terms of levels of service as a result of the commitment of our members providing that service, often on the basis of low or frozen wages over a period of time, but also increased casualisation. I just think we're at that stage now where people have really don't see the light of a Labour government, light at the end of the tunnel of a Labour government, and therefore they see no other route but to fight back through industrial action, right? And mobilisations combining both, as I say, industrial action, but also social movement activity on a whole range of other subjects, including the environment and the threat of climate change. Where do we come in all of that? I think two things. One, we do exactly what you're doing at the moment. I have to say some of the work that people are putting in is absolutely heroic in terms of the commitments that they're giving, the way in which we've been articulating our arguments about jobs, about casualisation, about wages, and about the general impact upon our community of austerity within education itself, I think has been brilliant, and we need to continue that on, because I think we are winning the argument, and impressing in some ways, mobilising support across the wider community rather than just our own members. That's the first thing. But I think in addition to the way in which we demonstrate a firmness of action by, yes, balloting when we have to, going out there, winning that ballot, making sure we get the turnout, but then also making sure that we're incredibly creative in terms of the actions that we take, and that is mobilisation. But the other issue for me now, and this is the discussions that are taking place, is how do we coordinate that action across the whole of the labour and trade union movement? It's interesting, the link-ups that are taking place at the moment in the discussions between different unions. I know that UCU have been having discussions with the CWU, but it goes broader than that. A number of years ago, we set up a group called the TUCG, the Trade Union Coordinating Group. It's a group of left unions coming together to talk about the issues that they're campaigning over, share information, coordinate lobbying of Parliament, and that's where I came in setting the group up, but also looking at how industrial action can campaign and can be coordinated. And I think that's where we need to go to now, that dialogue across the movement, where an individual union may well be taking action, but the timing and the nature of that action coordinated with other unions makes it that much more effective. And I think they're the sort of discussions we should be taking place, but not just leaving it at between a discussion between general secretaries, that's taking place anyway, but having those discussions at the grassroots level between local branches of different unions to see how that work can be coordinated, to lobby for coordinated industrial action at the national level, and also using whatever other vehicles that we've got available to us. And I know in a number of areas still, the Trades Council is still in some areas still an effective vehicle, no matter what the TUC does to whittle down their influence and their ability to coordinate action locally. Nevertheless, in some towns and cities, they still exist and still can be used as a useful vehicle. So my view is actually, at the moment, I'm quite buoyant about I'm buoyant about the scale of support that we've got. I have nothing but admiration for the level of engagement that our members have taken in terms of ballots, in terms of then taking action after the ballot. But I think now it has to be spread and it has to be coordinated to render it more effective. Final point for me in terms of just on the political side, you've seen what happens at Labour Party conference. It was a much smaller conference this year than previous years. The fringe actually though was sizable and incredibly active. That's where the vibrancy was. That's where the inspiration was coming from. On the floor of conference, we actually won virtually every resolution that the left put up. And then it was then the statement was made by the Labour front bench that they'd most probably ignore most of those resolutions. Well, that actually then gives us, in terms of campaigning, the terrain of struggle for the coming year in terms of the Labour Party. A number of us will be campaigning around accountability of that front bench leadership to the conference and to the rank and file members themselves. And it will be about opening up the debate in the Labour Party, because I think what the industrial struggle will do, it'll create a climate of opinion that even the Labour front bench can't ignore when it comes to some of these key demands, particularly around education, FE and HE. And again, I'm confident that not only can we win the rank and file, we can in many ways impose the rank and file views about the way policy direction on that eventual manifesto construction. After that, where the Labour Party goes, we'll have to see, but the opinion polls at the moment, they're looking pretty bleak. If they remain in that way, we'll see what changes take place within the Labour Party itself, but it gives even greater emphasis for the industrial struggles that are taking place, linked, as I say, to those other social movements where we're garnering and building all the time those broad alliances.